For years, I've been practicing what I preach and accumulating properties around the world, both for asset diversification as well as just enjoying myself in different parts of the world. But for the first time in a long time, I'm selling something, and I'm going to tell you what it is and why. I first visited Montenegro in 2014, did a whole tour of the Western Balkans, and really fell in love with the place. It's a beautiful place. You have, particularly in the Bay of Kotor, you have this beautiful beach surrounded by these mountains. It's really a captivating sight that you don't find in a lot of places. So it's this beautiful area. And I found myself kept going back. I eventually bought a tiny little apartment, which I eventually sold, in a little town called Stoliv at the top of the bay. Then I replaced that with a little bit larger apartment with beautiful sea view, not so far from the yacht club, Port of Montenegro, which has become incredible. And in 2021, I bought a piece of land, about 1,400 square meters, just right down the street from the apartment. And my goal was to build this beautiful villa. It seemed like quite a big task, but we have Anka, the real estate maestro that you've seen. She's been at Nomad Capitalist Live, and she is, as is the case in many of these smaller countries, she's kind of does all the different services in one. You know, there's not so many specialists. She's a real estate generalist, the real estate maestro, we call her. And I figured, hey, we will do, at some point, a beautiful villa, and I'll have a place to go in the summer. A lot of what is in the property portfolio is apartments. This will be a place where I can go, and it's a beautiful piece of land, sloped, olive trees in the back, put a great pool in the front with a view of the Adriatic, and you could build 500 square meters of space. Right, this will be great. I'm a big believer in just doing stuff, and a lot of the time you're going to get it right, and occasionally it's not going to go perfectly right, and you're going to learn something, and you'll fix it, and you'll move on. The good news is, I paid for the land, I think $300,000. The land now we appraised at $425,000. Obviously, land is land. Land is not as liquid. Probably not something that's going to sell tomorrow. Although there's some developers, some hotel or resort developers who've kind of bought up a whole bunch of land next to this piece of land, and so that would be the good first place to go. So the good news is, I can get out of this and hopefully should be better off for it, along with a lesson. One of the challenges that I faced with this land is what I like about a country like Montenegro. It's laid back, nobody really bothers you, and yet that laid back nature means things aren't quite as definitive. And so half the land is urbanized, which allows you to build this 500 square meter property, including balconies. That was actually something we had to kind of clarify. At first it was, no, the balconies are extra. Then it's like, no, we'll count the balconies in there. And then it's like, okay, well, when are they urbanizing the back half of this land so you can get some extra square footage? And it's just like, we don't really know. Now, again, I've talked whimsically about the fact that when Anka goes to pay the bills, the €200 a year property tax, whatever, for the apartment, it's like in some smoke-filled room and guys are playing cards and drinking coffee at 1:30 in the afternoon. It's laid back. You think they're out bothering you? They're playing cards at 1:30 in the afternoon. That's why, people want to go there. We talk about, freedom countries. This is it. But while they're playing cards at 1:30 in the afternoon, they're also not doing? They're also not, being as fastidious about figuring out when the back half of your parcel is going to be on the master plan and when you can build extra. And so there were different dates, given out. And so I ultimately said, all right, if I were going to build, let's just build with the space that you have. But then it was like, okay, here's the plan we want to build. Did a whole kind of beautiful plan, and Anka's like, well, it's not going to cost that much extra. Put a sauna, put a steam room in the house, put a theater in the basement. Like, you've got this whole kind of basement area next to where the garage goes. Like, put all the amenities in, and then you have this beautiful, entry level with a kitchen and a wine bar and all that stuff. And then the top floor, you have the bedrooms and the offices, and your wife wants an office. Have enough space that people can come and visit you. Everyone's got a place to work. Everything looks nice, and with that. Okay, do you have a space for, if your mother-in-law visits? Do you have a space for, but if you wanted to bring an assistant with you to spend the summer, they may not want to live in the house. Maybe they want their own quarters separately. Oh, no, there's no room for that. So it kind of became a matter of, this is obviously, you could have, there's worse problems to have, but it became, okay, do you want to adjust the floor plan? That's not a big issue, but it was obviously, it was a little frustrating of, when's this going to be urbanized? The other issue is just, in that same kind of setup, imagine how difficult building can be. I have a friend, he says, I don't know how you got so many bank accounts, passports, houses. Like I tried to open one bank account where I just moved, my head exploded. I think I have a pretty high tolerance for pain, even though I'm an anti-bureaucracy guy. I hate bureaucracy. Somehow my life is full of bureaucracy. I finally said this is a line too far. And I said to myself, I bet there's a villa somewhere that I can buy that has what I want. Now, I've got a very specific taste, and I spent the last 2.5 years since I bought this land assembling different, Pinterest pictures of what I'd like the place to look like. And it's probably hard to find something that matches that exactly. But I said to myself, be honest with yourself. If this costs you 1,400 euros a meter to build, which I think is probably a low estimate. August says, no, 1,400 euros. I said, I think with some of the stuff I'd want to put in there, I'm not a guy who puts in the 1,000 euro toilets. I don't buy the finest marble, but you want it to be nice. Top, as she calls it. It's probably a little bit more than 1,400. But okay, at 1,400, you're in it for 300 for the land, 700 for the fixtures. Then you've got to furnish it. It's hard to buy furniture in Montenegro. I mean, it's a tiny country. Everything has to be imported. I got a bed in my apartment. It's a beautiful bed. And I think it took 2 years for this bed to arrive from Italy. Like, no joke. I kind of expected that. So I don't remember exactly how long, because it was just like, I knew it was going to be forever. But I mean, that's what it takes. Like, you'd have to order your furniture today, like before you start building for some of this stuff. That's one of the pitfalls of living in a smaller country. You get the greater freedom. You get the low tax rates if you live there full time. They leave you alone. But, there's not many furniture stores, or they don't have a lot of stuff in stock, or you might not like the stuff in stock. You want to bring it in. There's tariffs on it. Okay, not the end of the world. Anyway, I thought to myself, okay, by the time you're done, it's going to be 1.25, 1.3. Then you have to build a pool. That's not cheap. Then I wanted to build a beautiful sitting area, olive trees, all that. This is the challenge of anyone who, builds their own house. And by the way, if you're thinking, oh, maybe I want to rent this out when I'm not there, that's the biggest thing, is like, you're going to put all this effort into building it to rent out part of the time, and it's just the numbers aren't going to work because you're going over the top thinking of the olive trees. Anyway, I said it's going to be, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and, the land is worth more now, so if I just patiently sell the land, I mean, I started looking at villas in other places. And I started saying to myself, residence permits in Montenegro, I had one, I let it lapse, because when they introduced their citizenship by investment program, they became more strict on this. If you don't spend 11 months a year here, we're not going to renew your residence permit. There's a way to get around that by having, like, let's say your land owned in a company, you pay yourself a director's salary, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't cost a lot, but it's just too much extra work. For what? A residence permit? I can go there for 90 days visa-free on more than one passport. I bet if I left for a couple weeks and came back for more visa-free, they probably wouldn't mind. I could essentially live there for whatever I wanted to live there. I don't need the residence permit. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, what would it cost to go to Greece, for example? Greece has a golden visa program. Greece also has a lump sum tax program. Montenegro recently raised personal income tax rates to like 15%. Still not bad, but it was 9%. Tax system is still pretty flexible if you run your own business overseas. But I said, okay, not that I want to live full time to where I would be a taxpayer in a place where I have a villa, but okay, let's go and look at Greece. And I found beautiful villas, 2.5 million. I don't know all the Greek islands. I'd have to go and check out, which islands are which. I would not own property in Spain. I don't think Italy, from what I can tell, is up to the same standard. I would not own property in France. I was in the south of France in Monaco recently, and quite frankly, wasn't impressed looking at some of these villages, and then wasn't impressed with the houses. I think Greece is interesting. Greece has a golden visa. You buy real estate, you get a golden visa. Are you going to get citizenship? I'm not so convinced that Greece really naturalizes people. And again, if you just own a villa, you're not going to live there. But let's say a pandemic happens, or God knows what happens, and you're stuck in your villa, to the point where you become a tax resident 1 year. Greece has a nice lump sum tax system where if you own a certain level of real estate, you can pay rather, minimal amount of tax. Now I thought, okay, well, maybe somebody from some of these more emerging countries might have difficulty, coming into the Schengen area versus like Montenegro is much more open visa policy, but it's a relatively minor issue. And so I basically realized, for a little bit more money, I mean, €1 million is not that much more, but for €1 million more, I can get a villa that's maybe not quite as big, but it's in a country where I can get a golden visa, has a good tax plan if I ever wanted it, perhaps it's a bit more prestige. I think living down the street from one of the greatest yacht clubs in Europe with lots of great restaurants is interesting. Although I find myself thinking, you know what? I don't want to go out to dinner anymore. Just, that's why you want the place for someone to come and cook for you to live. I would just stay at home and cook for myself. I'd have someone cook for me. You don't have as many things. You have Montefish in Montenegro, which is a really nice fish place. But other than that, I mean, the selection is not as good. It's not as cheap, by the way, as you'd think. And I just said to myself, perhaps better to go to the place that is a little bit more of a known commodity. You can order stuff, you can get stuff delivered. There's more local craftsmen, and perhaps it's a bit more prestige for I don't know how much that's really worth to me. But ultimately, the big thing was, I said, if it costs €1,000,000 more for a somewhat similar product, I said, you know what? Or €1,000,000. I said, I bet I would lose €1,000,000 in productivity with all the hassle of building something myself and the frustrations, and I can be emotional and people don't listen to me or they misinterpret what I say. Particularly, I mean, Montenegro is a place where people are direct, almost a little too direct for me. I think I'm pretty direct, but they're pretty direct. And I do wonder if I would enjoy spending 3 or 4 months there. I did spend 4 months there in my apartment a couple years ago, and I like it, but it got a little intense by the time it was over. Now, living in a villa versus living in an apartment, I think, you'd be more chill. I just thought to myself, all the hassles of building this property, because there's really nothing. We've done tours years ago here where we've shown you properties for sale in Montenegro. There's nothing for sale that I would want to live in. I don't think there that's a villa. Like, nothing's done the way you want. I think that the one benefit that I found, and again, I've always been kind of an apartment guy, pied-à-terre, I'm moving around. As I get a little bit older, and I'm like, you know what? I just want to go and spend a month and never leave the house. Or maybe I'll spend 3 months, spend the entire summer there at some point. It's a different mindset than, let me get a little bit of apartment, I'll pop in, I'll pop out. And certainly the idea of building something, as much as I have a high tolerance for pain, I think I've realized it's a bridge too far for me. And I've also realized, again, I finally I put more value on my time than I would have before, saying, I'm going to go nuts. I'm going to lose more business than it would save, and I'll miss out on the golden visa. I don't have any residence permit there now. I don't feel like I'm missing out not having the residence permit anymore, but hey, the more the merrier. At some point, the residence permit may not be necessary. But that's, quite simply my off-the-cuff thoughts on why I am putting this land up for sale. Listen, who knows? Maybe I'll change my mind at one point and decide I truly am a glutton for punishment and I'm going to build something. But I think that I would gladly, if I wanted another apartment, I would buy a bigger apartment in Montenegro. Ducali Gardens has beautiful views. Porto Montenegro is a beautiful place. I don't like to live at these kind of fancy resorts. I like to live near them, but I don't like paying for, the Villeroy and Boch toilet. I don't like paying the huge premium that comes from living at one of those places. You can buy property in bloody London for not much more per square meter than you could at some of these resorts. And that's why I don't really want to buy there. But from a lifestyle point, if I wouldn't mind staying in Montenegro if I had that. But I think when it comes to the landed property, the villa, I just think it would be too much work, and perhaps going somewhere where you've got a much greater supply. Me, as a person who's very sensitive to design and how things look and how things feel, in the context of feeling good, I wouldn't enjoy living in a villa with like the old stone walls and it's just like the old school. I wouldn't be productive. And that sounds weird, but I think that, I appreciate aesthetics. And it's probably better just to acknowledge that there's other places where the aesthetic taste is more similar to mine. I heard once that Russians, in their homes, like in Moscow, there's a lot of oranges, I'm told, because it's always so cold that you want warm colors. Like for me, if I had a home in Moscow, I'm thinking like, like a regal blue or something like the navy blue. And they're like, no, that's cold. We have orange. We have like warm colors to like give us the illusion that our life is warmer. And so you have a lot of Russians and Ukrainians, for example, that are in places like Montenegro, and you have these oranges, and you have things that are often designed for people with different design palettes than I am, whereas you go to Greece, I think it's maybe really the best one that I found, and you have very much what matches my Pinterest board at a price that I think ultimately the time saved would be worth it. So that is the story of me selling my land. And I imagine after it's sold, along with it, an apartment in Montenegro. What I also realized is that once that's done, you're going to want to figure out where you want to live in Greece. There are some great services in Greece. I mean, Anka rents out properties, and she does a great job at it in Montenegro. I don't know that there's anything of that caliber. There's no, 3 million euro properties that are for rent that I would like the look of in Montenegro. And so the thought is, why don't you put your 2.5 million euros, do exactly what somebody like a Grant Cardone would tell you to do, invest that, and spend the interest renting until you find out what you want to buy. I'm someone who doesn't necessarily feel comfortable renting. I do like the asset diversification, although Greece is maybe not the best place to do that. But once you realize, you can sell and you can go somewhere else, then the conversation of renting comes up and renting something better. So even though I'm a fan of owning, that's where we're going. And again, that's the story of my land for sale in Montenegro.